Hi everybody, I'm Helen Thompson from the British Franchise Association and I'm talking today to Mark Darnell from Home Instead. Hi Mark, how are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Brilliant. Mark, you come from a finance and accounting background and worked in manufacturing for a long time. Can you explain to us briefly, your journey from being employed into franchising?
Yes, well, I had many years of unbroken employment with Doc Martens Footwear Group and a very successful career, reaching the very top of that company, and never thought it would come to an end, of course. And suddenly, through no fault of mine, it did when I was only aged 47. And so I was faced with having to find something else to do, and because I couldn't afford to retire and didn't want to anyway. So I continued within the field to which I was accustomed, i.e. finance, admin, commercial sort of areas, really. And I tried that out firstly with a much smaller local family business, which again didn't work out, and I was made redundant, mainly because the family were at war with one another, and I ended up getting to be in the middle of it all. So that came to an end after about 18 months. And then I did one or two bits of consulting and tried other fields. The biggest problem I always had with looking for another job was how was I going to replicate what I had with Doc Martens, which was a very well paid position, but also an awful lot of autonomy, because the family who owned that business were very much, you get on with it, we pay you and others handsomely to run it for us, and we don't want to get involved in the day-to-day. Trying to find a replacement for that was very difficult. And, I tried a period of working in London, a job that came about purely by accident when I was chatting to someone on a train, and ended up doing that for about a 18-month period when it should have only been 6 months. But he liked me, and I was covering for his father-in-law, and who was recovering from heart surgery, and it ended up taking longer than they thought. But although the job was okay, it was very demanding. It was for a recruitment company, and I didn't know anything about recruitment, but that didn't matter that much because I was looking after all the sort of back office stuff. But it was travelling to London every day, Covent Garden, great place to work, but the only problem is it was 4.5 hours commuting every day for me, which was not pleasant in all weathers. And as we all know, the underground is a breeding ground for everything going, even before COVID started. So yeah, it was either too bloody hot or too damn cold. And yeah, I tried a variety of things, some little short-term assignments that I did for people, almost as a favour to keep my hand in. And but all along it started. I also ran a casino for a period, which was a different avenue, but it was in Northampton, which was close to where I live, so it suited me far better than travelling to London every day. But it was a very long hours, and such is the nature of business in a casino, that it all happens in the middle of the night.
Yes.
You're also expected to be there as the general manager in the daytime as well, which so you're only really off from midday till early evening, which is not very easy to do either. And so yeah, I did that for a period of about 2 years, when again it was a short-term contract initially, but they liked me, and I liked it actually in some ways, although I was never really a gambling person. So I was constantly on the lookout for what am I going to do when I get down to finding a real job, if you know what I mean. But the problem was finding one working for someone else was impossible, I found. I had interviews and people said to me, oh yeah, you're a great bloke, you'd be brilliant, but the trouble is we can pay someone about a quarter of what we're going to pay you. And I couldn't be asked to do it for a quarter of what I was getting. And I didn't need to that badly because of my severance situation with Doc Martens, which was substantial after 20 years and the position I was in and what I was earning. but I knew I had to do something. So at 52, I decided time to do something ourselves. And my wife and I were talking about it, and I kind of knew what I didn't want to do, but I didn't
That's
really
always a good
know
start.
what I did want to do.
Yeah.
And, so I knew about franchising because I knew one or two people who were doing it in different fields. I knew someone who'd got a McDonald's franchise, for example. I knew him quite well. He was a customer of mine in the past, and so I went to see him, and it was quite expensive to buy into a McDonald's situation. There were opportunities in our area at the time, but I didn't fancy serving burger and chips, really, if I'm being honest. And it was going to be like that in the beginning. You know, you couldn't afford to employ too many people. There's quite a high buy-in price as well, with all the livery that you have to do, and obviously in high street sort of locations, or expensive stuff to get into anyway. And so we looked at other things as well. We went to a couple of franchise exhibitions, which I found out about. I'm sure I probably looked at your website to find out about these things, and unbeknown to me who you were at that time. And we went to get some ideas, really, and there were far more things being franchised than we realised. We knew about obvious things like McDonald's, which is well known, but I mean, there were lots of other things. And that started to give me ideas. And I went to visit some of these ideas, or I pursued them, including in the field which I was in, which was obviously finance and accounting. And I can remember looking at people like Auditel, who are quite well known now, but they were relatively new on the scene then. That kind of appealed to me. That was in my field, if you know what I mean. But although I do come from that sort of background, I haven't really been a pure number cruncher and producer of accounts for quite a long time. And although you never forget, of course, I didn't really want to do that full time. So purely by accident, my wife had trained to be a nurse when we were young, and but had never needed to work. Her mother was also a nurse. Her grandfather was a doctor. Her great uncle was a doctor, and so she came from a bit of a medical family. And so we were looking at franchises at an exhibition we went to in London, and purely by chance we came across Home Instead, who we'd never heard of, and they were relatively new on the scene then. They'd only been franchising for about 3 years, I think. And so we'd experienced poor quality care provided by county councils mainly, with our parents, who had both died by then. But so we kind of knew the scenario and could relate to what the Home Instead people were telling us, because it hadn't been that long before that we'd had these issues and situations. So we thought there was something in it for us, and they liked us because we had the background of owners that they were looking for, i.e. someone like me who was used to running a business, albeit for someone else, and someone like the wife who was interested in looking after the care side of things.
Sounds like the perfect match.
So it was good for Home Instead. And we liked the people. Their approach to us was very calm and not pushy. People had tried to warn me about franchising and said, oh, you know, there's a lot of sharks involved in that sort of thing, and you've got to be careful. People make promises that they don't deliver, and I was sensible enough to know that anyway. But gut feeling, if you like, I didn't think that was the case with these people who we met. And they all sounded very genuine. They weren't pushy, as I say. They gave us a list of people who were franchising with them. I was a bit concerned that I wouldn't have the necessary background for it, not coming from a care background. And although obviously my wife was going to be able to cover some of that off, she didn't really want to work full time anyway. So we'd still got teenage children at that time, and she didn't really want to commit to doing something full time. So, but we were interested, and we were chatting about it to some friends when we went out for a meal a few days after that. And the lady who's Rosie's friend said, "Oh," she said, "well, I wouldn't mind helping you with that because I'm fed up with working for the NHS. And you know, I work nights all the time." She was a district nurse and travelled here, there, and everywhere across Eastern England, really, because she worked out of Huntingdon, and she was fed up with all that. She was like older than me, and she said, "Well, I'll leave the NHS and take my early retirement, which I can do, and help you with it if you want." I was conscious of the fact that there were lots of failing businesses at the time. You know, this was 2009. You know, we were still in recessionary times.
Yeah, 2008, absolutely.
2008, 2009, we were still in recession. And I was a bit conscious of, well, I was nervous about, I don't know anything about this. Am I doing the wrong thing? I can hear what Elaine's saying. And so we decided that we would give it a go anyway. Home Instead were wanting to give us a go. They gave us the list of all the people who they had franchised at that point in time, which wasn't that many. There were only 25 franchises before us, I think. Now there's 220 something. There were some others, but most of them had only started up just before us. You know, I think there were 50 odd before we started, but 25 of them in round figures had only started a month or two before us. So they weren't going to be able to tell me much, really. I was more interested in the ones that had been going for 3 or 4 years, of which there were a few. I was impressed by the fact that Home Instead gave us all their details and said, contact them, talk to them. And me being super cautious I did contact most of them, and they all said the same things as what the people, you know, who owned Home Instead were saying as well. And to my great pleasure, most of them did not come from a care background. And we even went to see 1 or 2 of them. They said, "Well, why don't you come and see us? You know, we're only an hour or 2 away." So we used to drive over, and I remember going to Oxford in particular, and they were very accommodating, very welcoming. We spent most of the day with them, and I came away thinking, if they can do that, I can do that. Because I had a strong belief in myself. And as soon as I found out I wasn't going to be out of my depth, I was quite keen to do it. It was a relatively low price to pay into. Some people would not say that, but I was in a position where we didn't have to borrow money to do it. I wasn't going to lose my house if it ended up being a failure, and I definitely wouldn't have risked all those sort of things. But I was also knowing that you have to take a risk in life to do things, especially if you start your own business. The other thing was I could afford to not have to earn money for 2 years to survive still. Might have had to cut back on some of my extravagances, but holidays and things, but I wasn't going to starve, if you know what I mean. And
absolutely.
That 2 years, and they warned us about that, said it could take you 2 years before you earn money. They were very, very open and honest about it all. And I can honestly say, 10 years later, there's nothing that anybody told us that was not true. Nobody said it was going to be easy.
No.
Nobody said things that we can point back to and say, "Oh, you lied about that." And of course, there's so many things in life. It's all about you and how much effort you put into it. And we had great desire, Elaine and I, and Rosie for that matter, my wife. Elaine and I had great desire. She had left the NHS. She wasn't getting a salary anymore. And so she had a desire to earn money from the business. Her husband was still working, so she did have some family income. We didn't have any, Rosie and I. So we had a great desire in making it work as fast as possible. And we found out that there were many opportunities in our area because a lot of the competition was useless. Especially most of it then actually was pretty useless. Most of it was only supplying public sort of bodies. There were no real private operators in the area, and I was well connected in the area. People knew me. That helped
Yes.
because people support good people who they know, and they weren't necessarily clients, but they probably knew one or two people who could become clients and that sort of thing. And I was determined I was going to make it work. And I remember after 1 year, we had more than exceeded the targets, and we were rocking. We were actually making money after 10 months.
Fantastic.
But we were very determined. We were a good combination of skills. Elaine was a very, very competent and qualified nurse.
Yeah.
But she also had a sensible head on her shoulders, and neither of us were scared to work. We didn't employ anybody else. Rosie came in and helped with some of the admin and IT stuff. We had a very small office, and we worked very long days, but we were very determined, and we knew it would be like that. And I think other people who come into it don't necessarily put that same degree of effort into it. And they still wonder why they don't get the rewards. And you're starting something from scratch. There were no other home instead offices anywhere near us, so no one had heard of it. And but in some ways that helped us because we were able to explain what the concept was. And of course, with all those sort of things, the proof of the pudding is always in the eating. You say you could do this, and you say you could do that. Do it and show us that you mean it. And our biggest problem, and Elaine always said it would be, was finding enough of the right care workers to do the work.
Absolutely.
I went out and got the clients pretty quickly, and suddenly it was, well, who's going to do it?
Who's going to actually deliver the care? So I think, from what you said, it is, isn't it? It's that hard work and determination. And yes, you are in business for yourself, but you've got that element of support from the franchisor. The model works, you follow the model, you do, what it says on the tin, if you like, and by doing that, then, the business is successful. But I think the fact that you were so determined to make it succeed is obviously, clear in where you are today. Did you say it was 10 years later, 10 years now that you've been with
just over 10 years. I mean, we looked at other franchises. We were encouraged to by Home Instead. And but somehow or other, there was something about these other people that we didn't quite trust or like so much. And so that it just had you get to be a pretty good judge of character by the time you get to my age. And I've met a few bloody creeps in my time who tell you what they want you to hear, but they weren't like that at all. And I had a feeling that they were genuine, as were the franchisees who we spoke to. They were very open, and they didn't just tell you all the good things. They told you about some of the problems that you might encounter as well.
But that's what you want, isn't it? That's what you want. You want that realistic picture of, the good, the bad, and the ugly almost.
So I've never regretted going down the Home Instead route. I think they have high standards and qualities which we have always admired and wanted to achieve ourselves. Elaine unfortunately had to leave the business after 3 years because she had a bit of a cancer scare herself, which thankfully wasn't as bad as they thought at the time. But also she had elderly parents who she was spending more and more time looking after.
Sure.
And who lived in an annex to her house. And so she decided after 3 years to give it up. And Rosie didn't still want to work full time. So we set about getting people, to help with running the business. And we've had a lot of success with that as well, because they're nearly all still here and have grown
that's fantastic.
with us.
Yeah. So, well, that's a testament to you as well then, Mark, isn't it? I think if you're creating that sort of work environment, then you are going to retain your staff, aren't you?
Yeah. So 5 years ago, we moved to our own office, which we always valued highly. I was in a position, fortunately, with my pension scheme where I could buy that outright. And we have a great office now and in the centre of our territory. And we have 180 clients, and which is only scratching the surface of all the requirements that there are. And so, the opportunities are endless, quite honestly. And,
fantastic.
But we've concentrated on quality and doing the job properly and complying with Home Instead's high standards, which we've always believed in and have always been stronger than the regulated standards, and so on. So we're careful about the people we employ. There's not enough of them, unfortunately, as I said earlier on. And it's getting worse because there's more and more people who need care, and being cared for at home is much higher on people's agenda nowadays, especially since COVID has come about with
yes, I can imagine.
all the scares with residential care and so on.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think the opportunities are great.
Yeah.
And we're looking forward to, we've just signed up for another 5 years, so we must be
Lovely.
keen still.
Well, that is great news. Listen, Mark, thank you so much for talking us through your journey. It's
That's
fascinating to hear, where you came from, that manufacturing background, and where you are today and where your business is today. I wish you every continued success with it. And again, thank you so much for your time today. It's much appreciated.
That's okay. Thank you.
Take care.